All right, growers, welcome back to Mike's Food Forest. So you want to learn how to grow carrots. Let's check out the bed. Here is the carrot bed. Let me explain how we got here. So I finally got a break in the rain to come out here and talk to you a little bit more about carrots. So carrots are actually a lot easier than you think to grow. As long as they have loose enough soil, enough organic matter in the soil, and free of rocks and clumps, then you're pretty much good. You're pretty much good to go. And also soil temperature. Carrots actually grow pretty much throughout the entire year, as long as the soil temperature is anywhere between 45 degrees and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, or 7.2 Celsius to 29. So that gives you a pretty wide opportunity to grow carrots, as long as you follow the right steps. And that's what I'm going to explain to you today. Step number 1, prepare your soil. So you want rich organic material, but you also want it to be pretty loose. So if you have to have perlite, sand, or anything else to loosen it up, go ahead and do it. You should be able to stick your entire arm through your soil without much pressure. Step number 2 is pretty simple. Just sow your seeds. You can use the trench method or single holes. So just make sure if you're using the single hole method that you have at least 2 inches apart. A little pro tip, think about intercropping other plants with your carrots, namely beets and onions. And I'll give you a few benefits of why to do that later in the video. Step number 3, protect your seeds. And you can use wood or tarps or burlap, just anything that can cover them, just like you're seeing right here, and allows moisture to be trapped inside. You want a dark, moist environment. Step 4 is keep them moist daily. You'll have to come out for the first 5 to maybe 14 days to make sure that they're always moist, continuously watering, and just ensure that you're monitoring the growth and make sure that they're not actually sprouting too far out and becoming leggy underneath the burlap or whatever material you're using. At that point, you know to take the material off. Finally, step number 5, thin the seedlings. Once they've reached 1 inch tall, you're going to want to thin them out so that there's at least 1 inch gaps in between. Some varieties may actually require 2 inch gaps, but just check the back of your seedling packet and it'll give you a good indication of what that would be. I'm going to go over thinning in a few days once we actually get some seedlings or some sprouts. But you'll see here, I'll give you a little example. If I were to do the trench method here, which I would never do with broccoli, which this is, I would have a whole bunch of little sprouts all over this. So in the case of carrots, you're gonna see that when I do the trench method in a few days, you'll see sprout, 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 sprout. I'm gonna be wanting to pluck out 1, 2, 3 here so that there's a space about the size of my, the first knuckle of my thumb in between, because then you'll be able to see or visualize a whole entire carrot right here and a whole entire carrot right here. And that would give you maximum efficiency of space for your carrots to grow as many as you can in one small spot without actually crowding them out. Let's move on to step number 1. But before we do, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you guys don't miss my next video on step number 5. That'll be coming up in a few days once we actually get some sprouts. So the soil I used was from a garden center around here that had a combination of leaf mold, worm castings, composted manure, other compost materials, and some topsoil all mixed in. They also added in a couple other organic amendments as well, to include just regular sand and I believe, mushroom compost. So that is a very ideal soil to have for any kind of vegetable garden. It's got a tremendous amount of organic matter in it. Step number 1, soil preparation. I'm adding in a few amendments. This one that you see right here is perlite, and perlite's used to loosen up soil, and it's great for rooting vegetables, especially for carrots, to grow a little more freely. My goal here was to be able to push my arm through the soil without any resistance, and that just gave me an indication of how well the actual carrots were going to grow. Eventually, I added 3 large bags of perlite, and my bed is 4 feet by 8 feet. Just keep on adding until you get the right consistency. I added a 3-pound bag of bone meal. Bone meal consists mostly of phosphorus and sulfur. These two compounds are key to vigorous growth for rooting vegetables like carrots, beets, and onions. Next, just mix in your perlite and bone meal evenly throughout the entire bed. I know I'm taking extra time to explain soil preparation, and that's because soil health is the most important factor for all plant growth, and the most overlooked aspect of why people have such poor production sometimes. These are the types of carrots that I'm going to be growing. For my depth, I have plenty of room for all of these. The longest carrot that I have here is an Atomic Red. I got that from Botanical Interests. I'm really excited about this Black Nebula I got from Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. These guys are amazing. They have a lot of exotic plants, a lot of exotic vegetables that you can grow. Actually, a lot of them seem exotic, but a lot of them are actually local to the area, so it's very surprising. This one's not, I don't think. I'm in Tennessee. I don't think the Black Nebula is local to here. I got a Shin Kuroda and a Carnival blend. Thought that was a little bit fun. So none of these are going to go past 12 inches, I don't think. And even if they do, once they hit something hard, they're just going to go make a dog leg, like a 90-degree turn. Maybe they'll fork off. I don't care. I'm not here to make a competition carrot. I'm here to kind of eat them. So I'm pretty sure most of them will look pretty nice and straight. It is nice to have most of the straight ones kind of look like this, so you can lay them out and show your harvest, which is pretty nice. But if you're in it just to make a large amount of food for your family, don't worry about it. I mean, they're still edible. If they start forking and look like something out of a nuclear power plant, whatever, as long as it tastes good, it's fine. I'm also going to be adding in some beets. They grow pretty well with carrots. So what I have here is a Chioggia, Gourmet Blend, Golden Boy, Early Wonder, and Bull's Blood. So here's a couple different companies to go with. There's the Ferry Morse, and as usual, I like to look at these Botanical Interests. They have a pretty good selection of seeds. So between Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds and Botanical Interests, they have really good seeds. Lastly, in this bed, I'm looking at growing some onions right in the middle. And what they'll do is they put off an aroma that actually deters carrot gnats or carrot flies and a few other pests. So hopefully this will be a little bit free of those. What those carrot gnats or carrot flies do to the carrots is when you pull them out, you'll see a lot of blemishes, you'll see some holes, you'll see some little spots that are not very appetizing. So just when you're growing carrots, just think about growing some onions in between as well. And think about other companion planting type ideas too, because all those different aromas that are going through the air from all the different plants and herbs and flowers can actually deter a lot of the pests, so you don't have to really spray them down with anything. Prior to sowing, you want to make sure that your soil is nice and moist. The carrot seeds are very small, and if you were to spray them all down after you sow them, they're going to get dislodged from their locations, and you're not going to have a nice, neat row. So just make sure that you spray down the soil. It's very wet, very moist. Carrot seeds need a lot of moisture to germinate. I also wanted to add a little bit more sulfur and magnesium, so I got a few handfuls to provide a light dusting of Epsom salt. And Epsom salt is a nice solution of about 10% soluble magnesium to about 12-13% sulfur. And what that does, it provides a little bit more vigor to the plants. It allows a little bit more or faster growth of the plants and root vegetables. All right, I think we're good on the water. We're gonna move on to sowing. All right, I'm gonna start on this left side and pretty close to the wall, because I'll be doing kind of an intensive growing method inside here, doing a lot of rows. But since I'm next to the wall, I wanna go with one of my smaller carrot varieties, just so that if it were to fork off and it hits the wall, it won't be too crazy. So I'm gonna start off with the Shin Kuroda. It's a little bit smaller of a variety. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start off by poking with my finger about 1/2 inch holes every 1 inch. So 1/2 inch is like from your index finger all the way to your first knuckle. So what you want to do, you could do 2 fingers and just start off on the side and go all the way down. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and your spacing is roughly 2 inches. And get any large clay clumps out of the way, any rocks. They do not like rocks. So just continue your pattern all the way. You're not really counting. Math is not really involved right now. But I'm gonna go pretty close to this wall just because I'm experimenting. You can go a little bit further out if you want to. Here's another big clump. Get these things out of there. Save them in your other pots, actually, because there's a lot of good organic material in them. All right. And I'm gonna do 2 rows of Shenkurota, and I wanna make them a little close together like this because I wanna make sure that we have a good yield. Sometimes people like to make trenches and just scatter them out throughout the trench. That's cool too. I might actually do that on one of these. The reason why I'm doing it this way is because I know later I'm gonna have to thin them out, but I'm gonna try this other method where I'm gonna put about 3 seeds per hole, and as they grow, I might get a yield of a couple of smaller carrots. I can thin them out as they get smaller and have little fingerling carrots and allow the rest of the carrot to grow. All right, we got them all sewn in. Each of these holes has about 3 or 4 seeds per hole, and some of the seeds kind of remained on top, which is fine. I'm okay with that. Now I'm gonna continue on with sewing the rest. All right, I got 2 trenches dug here for the onions, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put about 2 seeds every 6 inches or so. I want these things to bulb out really nicely. These are, again, the Walla Wallas. They tend to be pretty big. I want them to bulb out really nice and big. And again, we're planting them in here so that A, we can have onions obviously, but then B, the aroma from the onions is gonna hopefully waft around the carrots and drive away any kind of carrot gnats or carrot flies. Okay, so I got them all sewn in. I got our different varieties, 4 varieties of carrots, multiple varieties of beets, and then that 1 variety of onion in the middle. All right, so one thing I'll show you here, this is the one method where you can bunch 2 or 3 seeds per 1/4 to a 1/2 inch hole depth and 2-inch spacing. And then from there, when they grow, you can thin them as you need to, or you can kind of just leave them and harvest small ones and let the bigger ones grow larger throughout the season. Then we have this method, which is the trench method, where you just kind of sort of score the top of the soil about 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, not too deep, and sprinkle in your seeds kind of not too generously, but maybe like I don't know, 10 seeds per 6 inch or so. And what that's going to do is just going to produce a tremendous amount of seedlings. You're going to get a pretty good germination, and the reason why you do that is so that if you were to lose a few through germination and they didn't become seedlings, then you have a higher probability in this case by sprinkling more throughout and then thinning out more later, just so that you can kind of pick and choose which strong seedlings you want to keep, and then pluck out the weaker ones, and then you can either transplant those elsewhere. What I like to do is actually put those in pots, just a few of them anyway, if I have any, and then give them to friends. And just make sure that you're labeling each and every one of your rows, because as seedlings pop up, they all kind of look the same. So when you start thinning them out, you don't want to thin out the wrong ones. So just make sure each and every row is properly labeled, and you know that you're not thinning out the wrong type of vegetable that actually needs to be closer than a different type of vegetable. Once all your seeds are in, gently start to backfill the soil just enough to cover the seedlings about 1/8 of an inch to about 1/4 of an inch and no more. One thing I like to do is to actually use sand to backfill all the carrot seeds, just because it just gives just enough cover to trap in enough moisture for germination, but it's not going to cover it with some of the harsh or coarser types of topsoil that we have. So a lot of these garden mixes or potting soils, that you get from the garden centers, they have all these bits and pieces of wood. So they're basically composted down pieces of bark and sticks and everything. And you don't want that trapping down a really tiny little seedling. It's gonna have a hard time pushing through all that stuff. So once you've already established this nice trench, you don't wanna cover it up and make it hard for them to poke through and get some sun once they've actually sprouted through. So sand is a really good medium for that. I wouldn't use peat moss personally, just because I don't want to increase the acidity of the soil, as carrots really like to have just below neutral. So they like to be within like a 6 to 6.5 acidity. They don't want to be too much more acidic than that. If you were to cover this whole thing with peat moss, which would be a great medium for seedlings, it'll stay in the soil and it may increase the acidity, which we don't really want. So if you have any sand available, that's great. If you have some dusty, broken up other soil, that'd be a great one. Just anything that's loose enough, that's not gonna make any kind of imbalance in pH, that'd be great. All right, we got the sand all down, all over each of the rows. The other good thing about putting sand down is it kind of gives you an indication of exactly where the row is. And that's gonna help us out for the next step. So the benefit of these right here, and I put these on top of my boards just as an extra measure, and you can do this just by itself. These burlap sacks are rather heavy, especially when you wet them down. They're not gonna blow away like that kind of plastic or a tarp would, although you would probably weigh that down with a board anyway. But these actually trap in a lot more moisture, and they allow it to breathe a little bit as well. So there may be a little less mold growth if there ever was any, if your soil was too wet. But the main reason I like these is just because when you start to come out, if you lifted it up and noticed something was a little too dry, you could just wet all this instead of having to pull over an entire tarp, which would be a bit of a labor-intensive process. Here, you just leave them here and wet all the burlap sacks and it'll seep right in. And if you have any excess bags, put them on your other raised beds that don't have any plants in them yet, just to cover them up and ensure that any weed seeds blowing around in springtime don't get inside of your soil. So give it one last watering and you're done. That's all I got for you today. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you got something out of it as well. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I'm looking forward to making more videos for you. Get out there and start growing.